Hello guys, welcome back in Goku Manhwa. Let's continue.
Luang entered the grand hall, an opulent space adorned with intricate gold accents and velvet drapes. He settled into a plush armchair, swirling a glass of wine in his hand. A quiet chuckle escaped him as he gazed at the ceiling, lost in thought. Just then, Harold entered, his footsteps hesitant. His fingers fidgeted as he cleared his throat, forcing a smile. He muttered that he had heard rumors about Lu Shang securing an alliance with the Eastern Sovereign. Luang, breaking from his thoughts, turned his gaze toward Harold with curiosity, lifting a brow at the unexpected claim. Harold sighed, rubbing his temples before explaining that the news had already spread across the Kingdom of the Seven Stars. Luang had been masquerading as Harold's cousin, and now, his actions had drawn too much attention. With a smirk, Luang took another sip of his drink and asked if he had complicated things for Harold. At this, Harold stiffened, his eyes darting downward. He swallowed hard, anxiety creeping into his demeanor as an ominous aura swirled around him. Raising his head, he explained in a hushed tone that the Eastern Sovereign was not a man to be trifled with. Many noble families sought his favor, and Luang's involvement had painted a target on his back. Luang exhaled, setting his glass down. His gaze lingered on Harold, observing his worried expression. He smirked and took a step forward, placing a hand over Harold's shoulder. With unwavering confidence, he assured him that his father would handle the situation. Harold's arms dropped to his sides and his breath hitched as shock flickered across his face. Lu Shang's eyes glowed with determination as he vowed to reclaim Harold's lost status. The next morning, Luang left the manor with a composed expression. Harold walked ahead, his hands clasped behind his back as he led the way. They moved through the mist-covered streets until they reached their destination. Halting before a towering structure, Harold's gaze hardened. Lu Shang's eyes flickered with intrigue as he studied the towering monument, uncertain of its significance. Harold pointed at the structure, explaining that they had arrived at the heart of the kingdom. There were exactly 30 towers, each belonging to a legendary warrior. Luang silently observed the towering edifice as Harold continued. This time, 22 warriors had gathered, 2 more than expected. Harold turned with a solemn expression and ascended first. Luang nodded, his gaze calm, absorbing the weight of Harold's words. This was the first time he had learned of these towers. Without hesitation, Harold summoned his power, leaping upward. Luang watched in silence until something unnatural happened. His eyes widened in alarm as an eerie energy filled the air. The sky darkened and an overwhelming presence loomed. Thousands of eyes emerged from the shadows, locking onto Luang. Despite the oppressive force pressing down on him, a grin tugged at his lips. His eyes shimmered with anticipation as Harold soared higher into the unknown. The deadly gazes of the supreme warriors locked onto him, their intent suffocating. In that instant, Luang realized that his striking presence was as much a curse as it was a gift. If he had been nothing more than an ordinary follower of Harold, he would have perished under their immense pressure. Meanwhile, in a grand chamber, a figure met with Fiona, hands clasped behind their back, and inquired whether Luang was truly the one she had chosen. Fiona's gaze softened, a gleam of delight flashing through her eyes. A gentle smile graced her lips as she nodded, explaining with unwavering confidence that her father had granted her the freedom to choose her own destiny. In her eyes, Luang was exceptional, perfect in every aspect. However, this figure, Cumberland, the Supreme Chancellor of the Grand Martial Order and Fiona's father, lowered his head in contemplation. His piercing gaze met his daughter's as he warned that choosing a partner based solely on outward charm was foolish. Lu Shang, standing by, kept his expression composed, his attention drawn to the towering edifice ahead. Cumberland's voice carried a weight of authority as he evaluated Luang's abilities. While his strength was adequate, he was the supposed nephew of Supreme Warrior Harold, a man whose reputation was questionable and his power was considered subpar. He advised Fiona to reconsider, labeling Luang as unworthy. Fiona's expression fell, her fists clenching at her sides. Outraged, she attempted to argue, but Cumberland dismissed her with a wave of his hand. Turning away, his voice was devoid of warmth as he ordered her to remain silent. Without another glance, he strode off, stating that the Grand Conclave was about to begin and that he would reassess Luang's worth if he managed to survive. Hours later, the colossal arena buzzed with anticipation. The announcer raised his hand, his booming voice demanding attention as he detailed the rules of the Celestial Masters Tournament. Lu Shan listened intently, his focus unshaken. Before setting foot on the island, he had already heard whispers of this event from Harold. As he recalled, the tournament was divided into two grueling phases. His mind conjured vivid images of two warriors clashing, their weapons colliding in a brilliant explosion of energy. The first phase required grandmasters to collect rare celestial shards. The competition mirrored military skirmishes. Participants would battle fiercely, seizing crystals and amassing points based on their hauls. Luang envisioned warriors exchanging brutal blows, their fists igniting shockwaves of power. The second phase was direct combat, its outcome also determined by a structured point system. The combined score from both trials would reveal the ultimate victor among the supreme warriors. A flicker of intrigue crossed Luang's face as he stroked his chin in thought. Points mattered little to him, his true concern was harnessing enough pressure to force his breakthrough. If he could provoke all 22 supreme warriors into attacking him simultaneously, he would achieve the level of energy required to fuse his body with his celestial spirit. His eyes widened with exhilaration as a reckless plan formed in his mind. A smirk tugged at his lips. He would collect every celestial shard in the first phase and hoard them. His gaze sparkled with mischief as he realized this would infuriate the warriors perched atop their thrones of arrogance. They would come for him, descending in fury, their thirst for dominance pushing them to act. And in that moment, he would strike, defeating them one by one. The sheer thought of it sent a thrill through his veins. With renewed determination, he stepped forward, his heart pounding with anticipation. The games had begun. He could not wait any longer. As the first stage commenced, warriors gathered at the designated battleground, a sprawling valley filled with dense fog. Excitement rippled through the crowd. Among them stood the man and woman from earlier. The man silently lit a cigarette, his gaze cold and unreadable. The woman, adjusting her spectacles, studied her opponents with curiosity. Not far from them, Luang stood alone, anticipation burning in his eyes. The woman's attention locked onto him, her brows rising in surprise. To her, Luang's decision was reckless, choosing to act alone despite being everyone's target. She could not decide if he was incredibly brave or simply foolish. The man beside her glanced at Luang and then smirked, advising her to focus on their own goals. He also warned her not to stray too far, as the battlefield was ruthless, one wrong step, and someone would claim her life. Meanwhile, the Overcoming Dojo's team prepared for the challenge. Their scarred master's gaze sharpened as he turned to Dong Sheni. With a firm tone, he instructed Dong Sheni to lead a small group, ordering them to split up and report any unusual movements. Dong Sheni clenched his fists and nodded before setting off. On the opposite side of the valley, the marshals gathered. The northern marshal, arms crossed, sneered as he suggested a quicker method, ambushing others and robbing them instead of wasting energy searching. The western marshal laughed heartily, while the southern marshal smirked, agreeing that stealing was the most efficient strategy. Their sinister conversation drew attention from nearby warriors. A soldier, overhearing their words, frowned in confusion. To him, these so-called high-ranking officers acted more like rogue bandits than dignified leaders. Shaking his head, he dismissed the thought, his only concern being returning home alive. Meanwhile, Luang unfolded a map, his expression shifting with intrigue. A tool like this was invaluable. With a mere pulse of his mental energy, he could pinpoint the precise locations of energy clusters. His plan was simple, gather a few crystals before setting his real scheme in motion. His eyes narrowed as an unsettling sensation crept up his spine. He was being followed. Purple energy flickered around his body, but he remained composed, he had no time for distractions. With a swift movement, he leaped into the misty valley. Unbeknownst to him, 3 figures lurked in the shadows. One bore heavy bandages across his face, another wore a metallic mask, and the third, a hulking figure, exuded raw power. The demon-like warrior clenched his jaw, fury surging through him. Luang's swift escape only fueled his rage. The bandaged man chuckled darkly, stating that Luang could run, but he would not escape forever. Their hatred ran deep. They could not fathom how a mere outsider like Luang had dared to defy the noble house of Fiona. He had crossed a line, and they had sworn to ensure he would not leave this battlefield alive. Meanwhile, atop the highest tower of the island, a group of esteemed elders gathered. Their discussion turned toward the absence of 2 significant figures, Anjing and Lei. A grey-haired master folded his arms, a sly smile tugging at his lips. No one knew their whereabouts, but their absence played to Harold's advantage. Without interference from Anjing and the Black Demon Society, Harold's faction had the opportunity to claim greater influence. The chamber fell into silence as the realization settled in. The stage was set, and the true battle had only just begun. Without uttering a single word, the martial saint's gaze remained locked onto Harold, his eyes gleaming with intrigue. With a smirk, he remarked that his only concern was their insatiable hunger for power. If they indulged too much, they would eventually destroy themselves. He then asked Harold if he shared the same sentiment. Harold, standing beside him, met his stare defiantly, his eyes burning with contempt. He didn't bother responding. Instead, a confident smirk appeared on his face. He knew the truth. The reason Anjing and Lei hadn't arrived was simple. They were already dead, resting at the bottom of the sea. And soon, everyone here would meet the same fate. Meanwhile, a hooded woman, Lai Zhenyu, watched the scene unfold. She was the mother of Lai Wanwen. Covering her mouth in thought, Wanwen turned to her mother with a confused expression, asking why so many people were against Luang. Lai Zhenyu, arms crossed, pondered in silence before finally answering. She explained that everyone wanted to become Cumberland's son-in-law, but not all were qualified. Wanwen's eyes widened in shock. Couldn't the backing of a martial saint be enough? Lai Zhenyu's mind flashed to Cumberland's cold, piercing gaze. With a serious expression, she explained that if it were an ordinary martial saint, maybe, but Cumberland wasn't just the president of the World Association. He was one of the 5 strongest people on the planet. Harold, being one of the weakest, had no chance. Much less his so-called nephew. Wanwen placed a hand on her chin, deep in thought. To her, it was a pity. Luang was handsome, and she believed he and Fiona made a great pair. With a playful grin, she stepped closer to her mother, placing a hand on her shoulder before whispering with amusement. Would things change if Luang had her support instead? Lai Zhenyu's expression turned puzzled. What was she suggesting? With a proud smile, Wanwen confessed she had once tried to make Dong Shangi win over Fiona. Lai Zhenyu's face darkened. Without hesitation, she smacked her daughter on the head, scolding her for entertaining such foolish thoughts. Wanwen let out a yelp, rubbing the new bump on her head as she whimpered in protest. Meanwhile, deep underwater, 800 meters below the surface, Luang moved swiftly through the currents. The map in his hands was his guide. If it glowed, it meant energy crystals were near. As expected, the map shimmered brightly, revealing a vast coral reef ahead. Luang's eyes scanned the vibrant formations, recalling information from the system's database. Energy crystals were a condensed form of planetary energy, seeping from the planet's core much like sap from a tree or blood from a wound. A renewable resource, yet one that took time to replenish. Extending his hand, he channeled his power, drawing the crystals from the reef. His smirk widened. This was their first harvest, meaning there would be an abundance. However, with each extraction, future supplies would dwindle, hence why competitions like these were held only once a decade. Luang worked quickly, collecting as many crystals as possible. The more he had, the better. He had no intention of handing them over. Accumulating such wealth would only stoke the flames of greed among the martial saints. And with greed came desire. His golden opportunity. Lu Shang's eyes gleamed with wicked delight, a slow grin spreading across his face. That desire would transform into pressure, the exact force he needed to push himself further. He only hoped the martial saints wouldn't disappoint him. And with that, the video ended. If you want to see what happens next, don't forget to like and subscribe.